Yeah, we've got time for a couple more questions. Who's next?
John, you were talking about your failures and how you learn from them, but how do you all have the conversations with your clients whenever you are learning from your failures? Whenever you're
Say that again. Sorry, speak a little closer.
Whenever you're learning from your failures, how are you having these conversations with your clients? Are you want to be upfront with them, and you want to be honest, and try to save a relationship with them of some sort, obviously, but you're also, you said that, they are your laboratory. So how do you have those conversations, I guess?
So how do you have a conversation when your client, with a client that's hired you and you failed? How do you have that conversation with them? That's one of the hardest things that people can't do, because you have to admit that you fucked up. To me, I do it right there on the spot. I get it done, and they respect it. It's that simple. You literally have to make yourself uncomfortable, and they will respect it. If you beat around the bush, people smell bullshit right out of the gate. And I've spilled people, and I've literally walked up to them at the show, and I'm like, dude, Lee Larson, 250-pound guy. I don't prep a lot of big guys. We did really, really well, and I just went a little too hard on Friday, and he spilled. He didn't place top 5. And that guy prepped for 25 fucking weeks, spent a shit ton of money, and I messed up his peak. And I felt like shit. But you know what I would have felt worse about? Trying to blame it on some other bullshit. Oh, the judging's all fucked. You got fucked and all this. If you go right up to him and you legitimately look him in the face, or your client, or you send him an email, you're like, you know what? I'm sorry. I messed up. I'd love for you to trust me. I want to learn from this. Maybe this way will work better next time. Here's the other thing. I've messed up before so bad, and not with just peaking people, but I had a client that I was miscommunicating with, because I had 2 clients at the same time that had damn near the same name, and I kept sending the wrong fucking diet. And they were 2 brats, all right? One would eat 5,000 calories, and the other one was a fatty like me, and he could only eat 2,000. And I kept sending the 5,000 calorie diet to the fatty. And he's like, dude, this is awesome. I'm gaining weight, like I don't know what's going on. You know what I did after that went on for a long time? I told him I was sorry. I gave him his money back. He's one of my best friends. So you know what, Leslie? I don't even think I've ever told you that. That's my answer. You just be 100% real with them. You'll never go wrong if you do the right thing. That's what he says all the time. Do the right thing. Where's the mic at?
I'm like on call all the time. It's just like I've accepted it as part of my life, so I don't look at it as like working or life balance. It's just my life. So if you listen to the podcast, you listen to episode 107, it's called Win the Day. It has something that I talk about called the power list. And the power list is basically 5 critical tasks that I have to do every single day. Once those 5 tasks are done, my day is done unless I'm putting out fires for someone else, which is a big part of what I do. But those 5 things could be done by 2 o'clock, they could be done by 9 a.m., they could be done by 9 p.m. at night. But that's how I judge my day. And then everything else in between, has to do with helping my guys, helping my team, helping other people do their jobs effectively. But like to say, I just don't look at it like most people. Oh, I work 8 hours a day, or 10 hours a day, or 16 hours a day. I just see it as part of my life, so I don't like count it, if that makes sense. Like I said yesterday, I think people get caught up thinking about balance as such a rigid thing. They look at it as like, I've got to work from this hour to this hour, then I've got to go do this and this and this in order to be a good person. And I think it's more important about finding what routine works for you. A lot of people are, especially on the internet, these entrepreneur dudes are like, you got to be up at fucking 4:30. Motherfucker, I don't get up till like 10. You know what I'm saying? I just don't, because that's my natural sleep cycle. And But between the hours of when I'm awake, I guarantee you I get a lot more shit done than most people. So I think it's about important to find what works for you and just let that work. There's no set rules, you know what I mean? So that's what I would say.
Thanks. So this is one in a little bit of a different direction, but this is actually a question for Chad. So I'm a bit of a science nerd. So I just wanted to ask, there was the bit about the nutrient timing regarding the protein. So I noticed that a lot of the studies you were citing indicated that everybody was kind of taking the same amount of protein, about 20 to 25 grams of protein, right? So were there any studies that you found that actually sort of, because my protein intake for the day is different than his, you know what I mean? So was there any studies that kind of, I guess, more regulated the protein like per person and sort of kind of like what we do with carbs, like certain percentages being before and after, like anything that kind of looked at more the individual's needs as far as their protein and like cycled it before and after, or do you even think that matters?
It absolutely does matter. 0.25 grams to 0.3 grams per kg per body weight. So that boils down to ballpark 20 to 30 grams for most individuals per dose. So I mean that's the short answer. Like I said, on the protein side, some really good work out of Canada really kind of suggested that 20 to 25 gram dose around every 3 to 4 hours across 12 to 14 hours basically promotes the highest balance of muscle protein synthesis or muscle protein balance. So intermediate dosing, 20 to 25 grams every 3 to 4 hours tends to work very, very effectively. And like I said, that translates into around 0.25 to 0.3 grams per kg. So if you have somebody who's 50 kgs, really, really small, it dials back down. We've got offensive linemen that are at 330 pounds. They're at 140 kgs. It's a little bit more.
But do you think that the timing matters as far as like how much when they're consuming that?
Well, again, it goes back to, optimal protein intake across the day, across the 24-hour period, I think will continue to operate as the most significant variable. And then, I think as the size of the individual goes, if they do need to dose at a little bit higher amount, or a lower amount, basically per body weight, sure, go for it. I don't. We didn't really get into protein like dosing and safety. I mean, if there's anybody out there that's concerned that taking in too much protein is bad for you, this is probably a crowd where this is pretty friendly. I mean, it's anybody who ever says that to they simply do not know what they're talking about. They just send them, have them email me, and we'll set the record straight. But they simply don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, it's just.
On a different subject, this reminds me of our conversations in like 2008. You know what I'm saying? Like, dude, I got the funniest story about how I met him. I'll tell it at the end, but it's pretty good. No, I'll tell it at the end.
All right, so it seems like an overall theme and why a lot of you guys are the coaches you are today is from trial and error and just learning from mistakes. But on the flip side of that, what do you think is one of the number one things that you did to educate yourself to become a better coach?
Well, when I went to start my website, one of the things I thought was, people will just think I'm a meathead and I don't study this stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I did a couple things. People mentioned Joey Antonio, so I joined the ISSN. I got my certification there. I went and got another certification. I started attending conferences. That's where I met Jeff Volek, and I started reading John Ivey's work, and all these names, I know all these names because I just made it a point to read their research, read their books, all these guys, what I tried to do was I tried to read different perspectives, because like if you're a keto person and all you read is books by Jeff Volek, hey, that's great, but you're missing, hey, maybe there's another avenue. If you're anti-nutrient timing, hey, read John Ivey's work. You might find something you like. But so I tried to get different viewpoints. I attended conferences just like this, and when I started my website, I asked people if I could interview them. And that was probably, honestly, it was more for me than anything. I was like, oh yeah, man, I'm going to learn a lot from this guy. I remember, like, I could tell you so much I've learned from interviewing people. So you have to seek it out.
I think you just have to be open to learning. So I've worked with people that are just smarter than me. Actually, 2010, after I finished 4th at Junior Nationals, I hired John for a year to help me with training. So now, like, when I'm writing training, like, I use the principles that, you know, a lot of things that he went over, I still use. I don't know if you guys know Shelby Starnes, but he ran me through a prep. Back in the day, there was a guy with Beverly, his name was Jeremiah Forrester. He's out of the industry now, but he did a diet for me, and he was a top 6 guy in nationals. So I worked with people who were where I wanted to get, and I just dropped the ego. I mean, you don't always know everything, and as long as you just don't, you know, think you have an ego about it, you're always going to be open to learn. Even just my last prep, I had a couple national guys just always checking in on me and saying, hey, what do you think about that? Why don't you try this? And even coaches suggesting things to me, even as far as just things to do before I get on stage. And I was open to them, and I tried them on myself first before I would do it with a client. So one, I'm open to use myself as a guinea pig, and two, I've kind of just surrounded myself and worked with guys who are either where I wanted to be or I knew for a fact were just smarter than me. And that doesn't bother me. It makes me a better coach. And as long as I think I keep doing that, I'm going to keep moving forward in my coaching career and turning out good people on stage. So,
Again, to kind of mimic everyone, I think a variety of education is really important. So obviously I talked about like my master's research, but not everyone's going to do that or needs to do that at all. I think higher education is great, but it's not absolutely necessary. So if you are in school, of course you can learn. And if you are in school, what a lot of times you guys will find is that it's not directly, of course, talking about physique athletes or bodybuilding. So I found, at least in undergrad and my master's program, advisors that were like into this and could understand my questions, and I would talk to them after class or set up office hours and ask them stuff, and I was that annoying person, but it really helped to get their viewpoints. And then outside of that, going to conferences like this, and even stuff that you don't necessarily do. I attend one of the biggest keto conferences. They started a few years ago. I don't do keto, but I learn every single time I go there. I meet new people, I listen to the speakers, I read a ton of books. Research reviews are great. Obviously, social media can be very conflicting, but you can learn a lot too. And what Jason said was awesome. You have to try on yourself first. You don't have to, but I would recommend it if you can, at least so that you have empathy towards what's going on. And it's not necessary, but it can help a lot. So a variety of education, I think, is very, very important, and you should never stop that.
Let's see. So I think learning from other people's mistakes, especially like within this industry. I was talking to a few folks earlier about how this industry just tends to recycle people. Like if you go back 10 years, I can give you names that you'd be like, who? Really? This was Mr. Big Shot? So, and part of the reason that they're like no longer here is because they just became dinosaurs. They got so big, they're like, I'm done. Like my methods are my methods. These are my philosophies. Like that's it. And that's one thing that I try to check myself with. Like every single year, I try to have a discussion with myself. Like, what are you doing this year? Where were you wrong? Like last year compared to this year? And I try to continually upgrade and try to grow with the industry. And I strive to not be that dinosaur. Strive to not be that local coach that like everyone kind of talks about. It's like pinches his athletes. Needs a little bit more peanut butter. You know, don't be that guy. So yeah, continue learning. It's huge.
For me personally, I laugh about this all the time. I took a stupid route to where I'm at. I found this passion after I was already done with school. So I didn't have a formal education in exercise science or nutrition, and like a lot of these, I think pretty much everyone here had some sort of mentor or coach, at least at the beginning. I didn't have that either. I was so naive to the online bodybuilding community. I was like, what's a forum, you know? And so I just kind of felt my own way through it. So what I would do is I was actually getting, like Lawrence said, a variety of, I would order, I would get subscriptions to some of the scientific journals that were available online, and I would just read them, and I had no base of knowledge at all. So I would, every time I would come across a term or an idea that I had no clue what it was, well then I would look that up, and it took forever. But then I was also reading like the bodybuilding magazines, you know, like Flex and stuff like that. So I was kind of like seeing what the meatheads were doing and then what the scientists were doing, and kind of putting it together in my own style. While it was a hugely inefficient process, I do think it helped me in one manner in that I came in with no preconceived notions. I didn't have anybody influencing my ideas at all. I didn't really look at what other people's methods were, and so it kind of allowed me to even like read studies. And a lot of times what I would usually take away from the studies weren't even the conclusions. When you would read them, it was the tidbits of information that were interesting that you wouldn't expect about the study. Whether it be, I would read it and I would say, well, I didn't like this method of the study. It seems like they could have done it better here. And you can kind of take away more practical implications from the study than necessarily the conclusion. So I would say, you know, when it comes to looking to develop your own methods, try to keep the most open mind you possibly can and try to avoid preconceived notions, and you'll learn a lot that way.
Mine's really quick. So it's definitely okay to look at the people in the industry, the coaches in the industry that are doing what you want to do, and they're getting results, they run a good business. Look at them and follow what they do, and then take that and apply it to yourself and your clients. There's absolutely nothing wrong with learning from the different coaches. And a lot of people don't want to admit that, but a lot of people have done that. So if you don't have the money to hire a coach, you're not interested in that, you can still follow, you know, everyone up here has articles written. You know, we've got the podcasts that are all out. If you want to learn about your business, you've got the business podcast, the Training and Nutrition Truth podcast. You can go to conferences and all that stuff. So that's a good way to just take it and apply it instead of hiring a coach. There's certainly nothing wrong with that.
Well, I had something to say too, but Chad actually and I agree, so I'm just going to let Chad say what we both think.
So this is on behalf of Andy and I. No, but I guess the one thing that I was going to say, because I tried to grab the mic basically as soon as the question was asked. So, and this is, because I've gotten to know Andy and John and Cliff the best out of everybody here, and I can say, so just really kind of speaking more about the traits that I've seen with all three of these guys. They're I mean, two things. Their mind's open, all right, to failure, to doing well, and then more often than not, they check their ego at the door with, I mean, so to basically offer up suggestions. They're absolutely not afraid of failing, and I think that's so very important. From the self-education side, folks, there are more free scientific journals out there than there's ever been. You know, so now if you don't come from that background and that type of writing is I guess a little bit more intimidating, that's a little bit of a challenge, you know, but I mean overall, I mean there's more scientific content that's out there, so I mean look for it. And then I mean secondly, if there's somebody who wrote a paper that you like, I mean email them. I mean every single paper that I've written, my email address is on there. Send me an email, I'll send you the paper. Give me a phone call. I don't care, you know. So and then I know hundreds of scientists that feel that way. So take that for what it's worth.
One thing I'll add real quick because John's too humble to say it, but you've got a great website. John, what's your website? It's mountaindogtraining.com? Mountaindogdiet.com. So there are good websites out there with the top people in the whole industry that charge, and they put out new content, not just from John. You have multiple people that add to that. So just real quick, I wanted to touch on that because, I mean, that's great. That's great information that you can pay for and get.
Also, to touch on what you just talked about, I asked John this, I think, a couple months ago. I want to get a degree in like psychology, but also either like nutrition or like exercise. But like there's degrees out there for like kinesiology, exercise physiology, strength and conditioning, or you have your master's in exercise science. What would you guys recommend for someone who's wanting to get a degree in exercise, but actually for it to be useful? Because there's so many degrees out there, but I want it to be useful. So what are your guys' takes on that?
Well, you know, I mean, that's what I do. I mean, that's the world that I live in. I mean, I teach in the undergraduate exercise science program at Lindenwood, teach in the graduate human performance program. I've done that at Oklahoma and New Mexico as well. I think overall, it's critically important that with the way that the educational structure is set up in most academic programs at the university setting, we teach a broad foundation of the theoretical principles. So it gives you a very good foundation of key information that you run into throughout your day-to-day life. But there is absolutely no replacement for getting out there, getting in front of somebody, touching somebody, communicating with somebody. We can't teach you these types of things. I mean, degree programs would take 6 years, and nobody wants to pay college for 6 years. You know, so there's, you know, I think a big part of your question, you can help to answer yourself by really clearly defining what your goal is from that education, what you truly want to do with it. I've said this many times, and mind you, I'm a physiologist, which means I study the body and how it responds. I fundamentally feel like we know really all that we need to know about how the body responds to exercise and nutrition to help improve it from a health perspective and from a physical appearance perspective, but we are just beginning to scratch the surface from a psychological perspective. So, and I say that many times, that the longer that I'm in this business, I feel like the best personal trainer has maybe 3 or 4 classes in exercise science, so I'm totally killing my own major, and they have like 14 PhDs in behavior modification. I'm dead serious. But the thing is it takes experience. It takes failures. All these people up here, how many clients have they done well with? How many clients have they not done well with? You know, so at some point, I think, I mean, believe in yourself. I mean, get an educational base, and then just get out there and just keep going.
So the number one thing to answer your question is you have to find a program that is, of course, that does that. An advisor that does that. An advisor that's interested in it. My advisor was interested in physique, sports, and dieting. That's not normal, but I found it. And you may have to move. You may have to do a lot of research. If you're in an undergrad program and it's a lot more broad, what I did was I looked at the faculty at Florida State, because I started out dietetics and then I switched, so I didn't really know many of the exercise science professors. When I switched, I started to look at what they were all interested in. And Dr. Michael Ormsby, if anyone knows him, he's an awesome researcher, and he had a line of research that I was interested in. So I came to him, I approached him and said, I want to do research under you, help as an undergrad student with the master's. And it's called different stuff at every program, but I helped basically do stuff with the research that the master's level students are doing, and I got to learn under them. And then, so that was very broad, and then I still went out of my way to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, and I learned very quickly what I didn't want to do, because they were doing many things that I didn't want to do. And I was like, okay, I definitely don't want to do that for my research or my application. And then for my master's, I went ahead and I found Dr. Campbell. He called me and said, this is what we're doing, and I was like, this is where I want to go. So you're going to have to do that research on the back end, and there may not be a program yet, but if you find an open-minded advisor and then you're saying, hey, this is what I'm interested in, they might be totally on board like Dr. Campbell was. He didn't come to me and say, let's do a flexible dieting study. I said, hey, would you be on board doing this? And he was super excited. So I know that I was beyond lucky and blessed that he was, but you know, you'd have to kind of take that into consideration too. So I don't know if that answered, but it helps.
Becoming a diet coach, you're going to get a PhD in psychology anyway. I promise you that. I guarantee every one of us up here have learned to deal with that. I always joke and tell people, I know we got one more question. I can tell you when every single female client of mine, and a bunch of you are looking at me right in the face, when you're going to have your period before you know you will. And I also have to walk you back off the ledge to explain what the scale is and all that. So there's also a lot of in the trenches knowledge with that.
Yeah. You really do get to learn people pretty well. And, it's kind of funny because I think one of my weaknesses in the beginning is that I didn't understand people at all. Generally, I found that, especially early on in my life, I'd never feel like I related to people really well. And like when I would see people doing stuff, not even as a coach, even before, I would see people doing like dumb shit and think to myself, what are they thinking? And so then I would just kind of like go along the process, like, why do they do this? And then I think often it sounds like you have an analytical mind already. And really, a lot of times, you can understand people's motivations sometimes better than themselves because you're on the outside perspective. And if you just really look at what they're doing and, the way they react to situations, a lot of times you can get an idea of where they're coming from and then start to deduct what they need to hear. But, listen to Lauren's response in terms of that. But in terms of practical experience, that would be my suggestion.
I will say this too, because this is important for everybody here. The world is changing in the way that we educate ourselves, okay? 20, 30 years ago, you had to go to college. You had to get a PhD. You had to have these credentials to be respected. And the reality of life right now is that that's changing, okay? You can learn more now on your own than you'll ever learn in a formal classroom. You can learn more effective strategies as to what you're doing by studying the specific things that you want to learn on your own without anybody telling you, study this, study that, study this, and become what you want to be. And we've never had that in the history of the world before. It's never happened. So I would be, and what Chad said is know where your destination is. What do you want to be? What are you trying to do? Why do you want the credentials that you're looking for? Why do you need them? Because here's the thing. You're going to walk out of that school with a $100,000 debt. And the credentials that you have from that school are going to pay you $50,000, $60,000 a year. And unless you figure out how to somewhere leverage that, you're never going to pay that off. So I would think long and hard about traditional schooling right now. It's changing. I don't have a degree. Most of the guys I know that are very, very successful are fucking college dropouts. And they chose to self-educate. They chose good habits over formal education. Reading a book a week for 20 years like I have. Okay? You don't have to do it the way society says you have to do it. And we're fortunate enough to live in a situation now where you can educate yourselves far more effectively than anyone else can educate you. And that's never been the case before in history. And I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to school. I'm just saying it's something to think about, because tagging yourself with $100K worth of debt that you're never going to be able to pay, that's not a great way to start out life.
This is to the Gen Pop coaches. What is the best advice you have for someone that's trying to gain as much lean muscle mass as possible, that just started a reverse diet after a lifetime of yo-yo dieting?
So tell everybody real quick, because you and I are working together.
Yes.
So I'm going to skip this one. So give them a real quick scenario. By the way, Brian Lagunas damn near won the whole First Form Transformation contest. There was a number of people. Leno won it. You were right there in the mix. There's a whole bunch of other people. So how much weight did you lose? Let's paint the picture for these guys so they can answer.
135.
135 pounds, all right? So I'm going to help paint the picture here because you guys will understand metabolically what was going on. So he lost a lot of fat. And as we all know, as a natural guy, he's lost a lot of muscle in that process. So where he's at currently, we've reverse dieted. He hasn't gained a pound since December, but his calories are all the way up. You're eating 370 carbs a day. That's where he's at. He's wanting to know what tips you guys have to help him put on muscle.
Well, I don't know what your training habits are, but if you are not, I tend to look at things real simplistically. If what you're doing now training-wise, because I know whatever you're doing diet-wise is working, if you don't have the results training-wise, you got to change your training. There is no magic answer, but you have to push yourself. You know, when you're sitting there training and it starts to hurt, you go, "Oh, that was a good set." No, you should think, "How in the hell am I going to get another 5 reps?" Walk out of the gym and say to yourself, "I never thought I could do that." I mean, if you really want to make drastic changes, that's what your mindset has to be. It can't just be go to the gym, work out, and go home. You know, remember my doomsday example? Your body will adapt. So that's a quick tidbit there.
Well, what came to my mind, did you just start training while the fat loss was going on, or?
I started, July will be 2 years.
Okay.
But I've dieted most of my life.
So, what I think is, it's probably, it's just my opinion, I don't know if everyone will agree with me, but one of the biggest differences between like an intermediate or a beginner trainer and like someone who's been doing this a really long time is like when I go in to do a set, from the first rep, I'm getting everything out of the muscle and it already is hurting and starting to pump up. When I was intermediate, I would just pump along and maybe that 10th or 11th rep would start to hurt. So to get yourself, I wish someone would have kind of explained it to me and told me that earlier in my bodybuilding career. But I think what really separates the advanced trainers, which I would like think I am now at this point, but it took me a long time to get there, is that try to focus and make every rep count from the get-go. Everything is a contraction and you feel it, okay? Get yourself out of that intermediate stage immediately. Because like it sounds like your diet, I mean you're already 375 carbs, so, and John knows what he's doing with diet, so it sounds like you're gonna end up being a surplus, okay? And then you're gonna have to practice patience. I mean, I don't know what your testosterone profile looks like after losing that much. I don't know if you guys have had it tested, but you know, that needs to be healthy, so your hormones have to be there. It might not hurt to get your blood work and see where it's at, you know. I've had guys just from natural supplementation increase their testosterone 300 points from some really good Bulgarian Tribulus and then Doug Miller's product, that core test. Put those two together, 300 points I've seen go up on my guys that are natural. That's a pretty significant amount that's going to allow you to recover more. I'm not saying it's going to put slabs on you, but you've got to tilt everything in your favor now because you've already hired a coach, and that's gonna get you going in a much faster direction. So I think focus on your training, like John said, and then try to get yourself in that mindset where every rep counts immediately. And then I would probably get some blood work right now, is what I would probably do.
So they took all my answers. But yeah, training age, patience, blood work is huge. A lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too, kind of overlook it. You're like, no, I'm fine. But if you don't get the test done, you really don't know where your levels are at. So that's going to be really important. Patience, training age, and then of course training intensity. And try new things. That would be my one thing to add. Just try different styles of training. Maybe one thing, you know, everyone is very different while still being similar. You know, you have to have, of course, volume and intensity and, you know, accumulation of things. But maybe try a different type of training style, see how that works for a few months, give it a go, and then, you know, try something else if it's not working.
So I think firstly, like what you did in regards to the work ethic, like that part you have down. I mean, you went way out of your. I can't think of a time in my life where I've like stepped that far out of my comfort zone. Even when I went from like just like gym meathead to like get on that stage. I mean, they weren't that far apart. So in terms of the work ethic, it's there. You obviously had to modify a lot of things in your lifestyle in order to get to this point. And I would say probably my biggest concern is that you just went through a fat loss phase where the goal was to watch the scale go in that direction. And, you know, you obviously did some things to hardwire that, to make that happen. They were very successful and useful to you during this extended fat loss phase. But now that you are going to reverse the other way, it's going to take a whole different set of habits and goals. And the biggest difference between fat gain and muscle loss is that they happen like at very different rates. So now you're going to have to invest in going this other direction that almost feels like wrong, right? It's counterintuitive at this point. And it's a much slower process. And you're going to have to gain weight. Like you're not going to put on significant amounts of muscle if you're running around. To a certain extent you might, simply because of your training age, you know, you're eating enough now, and just that in itself is going to, you know, cause some muscle gains. But if you want to go past that, you're definitely going to have to get into a point where for an extended period of time, of a few months, you're going to have to eat at a surplus, and you're going to have to gain some weight, and that might not feel fully comfortable. However, I think one place you can go back to in your head is that, dude, I lost 135 pounds. Like, I know how to do this fat loss thing. Like, I'm really good at this. Now, you're better at it than me, dude, right? So remember that as you embark in that direction, as you gain your first 15 to 20 pounds gaining, is it like, I can take these off because I've done far worse than that. So that's probably the biggest thing, is like learning to go in that direction. That's going to take a while, and you won't be comfortable with it at first, but you have guidance, and that's going to help you. Like, it's going to help you stay objective when it comes to this next thing, which in its own way is just going to be as difficult as the fat loss phase you just encountered. Do you guys have anything to add?
So, you know that, like, dude, I struggle with my weight a lot too. So I want to tell you this, like, and John knows this because John and I talk about dieting a lot. But, and I think this is important for all of you guys who are coaches to think about, is that, people who lose weight tend to think that it's really hard, like it's really fucking hard. It is hard, and it's a difficult thing. But I think it's important to note, and these guys touched on it, and I told you this yesterday, that it takes just as much, if not more, discipline to put on muscle. And a lot of people who have lost a lot of weight or who are always like overweight have a hard time understanding that, because they look at dudes who have muscle and they say like, oh, well, that dude's in great shape, it's easy for him. It's not easy. It takes just as much discipline, just as much planning and work, and even more so, and definitely more patience. And it's just going to take time. So, realize that, because a lot of dudes who lose a lot of weight, they give up on the muscle, and then they end up getting fat again because they think, well, I'm just not built to have muscle, and so then they give up hope. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's just changing the math.
So those are all great points, and that's why I wanted you to hear that from everybody else. Chris Valentin, I want you to please raise your hand. I want you guys to get together unless Chris took off. Okay, if not, you need to look up Chris Valentin, a client of mine who's been through everything you've been through. He's had skin removal. He ended up putting a bunch of muscle on. He's won a pro card. He's went that route. Connect with him. Here's the thing. I look at a lot of this like almost building a business. You talk about being aggressively patient all the time, and you need to approach it like it's building a business. I have the Fat Muscle Project started, and I want it to be big, but I know damn well it's going to take time. And the last thing I want to tell you is you need to enjoy this process, because here's the thing. You got rid of, I don't know, like just think of some old shitty ass beater, like some old Chevette that's rusted out. That's gone. Now you've got a nice car. You see what I'm saying? And you're adding a bunch of high-performance stuff to that car, and you need to enjoy that process, because a lot of people stress out, and they don't enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it, it's going to suck. Dude, I'm telling you, you're building a race car right now. Enjoy it, and then you're going to walk around in that motherfucker. You're going to be like Sal walking into the pool, holding beers, and your shit's not going to jiggle. Like you're going to have that. So you have a race car. Enjoy that process. Take one more.